Possible cyclone developing in the Central Pacific on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for November 26th. Tropics remain quiet today with no active tropical cyclones, although as we've seen there's one or two little areas of interest that are bubbling underneath the surface that may start to push through in the next few days. We are code blue for one of those systems as we track them live. In the Atlantic, it's day 179 of hurricane season, and thankfully there's no areas of interest here, nothing to monitor for the next 5 days, which does take us to the end of Atlantic hurricane season. So is that it for the Atlantic? It's looking more likely. In the Eastern Pacific, it's quiet, but in the Central Pacific, we have an area of interest that's increasing its chances right now, up to 30% now for this potential system with increasing model support. I think we could see further upgrades on this in the next few hours, and it could be our Hone candidate. And in the Western Pacific, we've got another system marked still 40% chance now, marked by our analyst team, although model consensus really isn't there. There's very little model support actually, but it will remain a low rider moving towards the southern Philippine Islands. North Indian Ocean looks very quiet, in fact the whole Indian Ocean at this point. No areas of interest to monitor here and nothing expected in the next 5 days, which is how far we go on these graphics. Let's take a look at the current satellite imagery across the Atlantic Ocean right now, and you can see here that it's dry air that's dominating once again the main areas of development. A big band of moisture in the southern United States pushing on eastwards, and in the southwestern Caribbean you can see sort of like the ghost of a system that's really stuck up against dry air there. And this is what the Eastern Pacific looks like, and you can see a massive strong area of dry air off the west coast of Mexico. A little bit more moisture further south in the tropical zone, but really very disorganized, nothing happening here. And we get a view of the Central Pacific right now. You can just about make out Hawaii in the middle, and this is the system that we're looking at that now has a 30% chance of developing. There's sort of two low pressure centers at the moment, one to the southeast and one to the southwest and northeast, and we've got this other system here as well, which a few people have been eyeballing, a non-tropical to begin with low pressure system here, but some people reckon that it has a chance or may already be a subtropical storm, so that would be fascinating to watch. That system, if it does end up getting any traction, doesn't have very much time, but you can clearly see the tropical system to the southwest there, which will eventually consolidate in about 2 or 3 days, and then it could really get going. The GFS is really going for this one in the latest model run, which we'll present to you shortly. So interesting goings on there in the Central Pacific. Westpac right now, you can see those two systems once again, and I would say the western system really is dying off now. The eastern system still has it's starting to look fairly decent. There's a lot of actual small little disturbances going on across that whole southern part of the Western Pacific Ocean, so we'll wait to see whether any of them get a proper spin going. Indian Ocean, very quiet there. There's some convection in the eastern part of the Bay of Bengal, and I think that's actually been marked as an invest, although I'm not really sure why. Very low chance of development, doesn't really fit onto our bulletin. And in the southern hemisphere, things looking... there's actually a little bit of rotation there along the coast of Western Australia, I think, which might be partially to do with that invest that we were tracking, but really it's not a tropical cyclone, but there is elevated rainfall occurring in the northern part of Western Australia and in the Northern Territory. Sea surface temperatures briefly reached 30 degrees in one or two little parts of the Eastern Pacific. Just to look at the Central Pacific there as well before it goes off the screen, around 27-28 degrees Celsius if lucky for that Central Pacific system. The Atlantic over there, you can see that temperatures are still looking decent for the large part of the Atlantic Ocean. If you draw a line off the east coast of Florida from Cape Canaveral out east, there's still a lot of warm water over there, but it's going to be the Caribbean that yields any further tropical cyclones, we think, if any happen at all. Indian Ocean still decent, 28 degrees plus over a large part of the basin, and in the southern hemisphere there you can see near Australia very warm waters and increasing. Western Pacific, the warmer waters are closer to the equator, of course, 30 degrees plus in the low latitudes for that potential system that's pushing through. The one further north around 29 degrees Celsius. West Pacific waters are still very decent and above average. Philippine Sea particularly. Sometimes we can get those big late season cyclones that come out of nowhere. Keep watching. Look to the eastern Pacific there, you've got the La Nina effect still there on the anomalies here, and in the Atlantic Ocean it's the higher latitudes, the subtropical zone that's above average, and average or maybe even slightly below average in the open Atlantic tropical zone. Westpac above average as well still, Indian Ocean around normal. In the Atlantic, the Caribbean Sea, you can see there's still a few areas of oceanic heat content into the reds, so still some energy left. Eastern Pacific, it's fading, and in the Western Pacific fading a little as well, although not in the deep tropics down there below 10 degrees north. You can see really high amounts for any low riding systems, of which there is already one right now. Let's check computer models then. This is the GFS for the next 5 days. You can see that potential system in the north, and then the one in the south there really gets going and becomes a hurricane before the end of day 5 on the GFS there. In fact, I think that might even be day 3 or 4. Let's just watch this again. There's the 26th, and then the 27th, it becomes a tropical cyclone then, and then on the 28th, 29th, just late on the 28th probably, it becomes a hurricane on that GFS scenario. Well, it's been on and off with it, and it's not consistent yet, but if that happens, then that would be a turn up for the books, certainly. And here's the rain channel from that storm as well. If the GFS goes to plan, you can see that near the center line of where that storm passes, which should be quite far away from any populated islands of Hawaii, it will reach probably about 7 or 8 inches of rainfall. You can see on the actual Hawaiian Islands there, whether it's to do with the storm or not, I'm not actually sure, but less than an inch generally for the main islands of Hawaii. So it's not going to be a huge rainmaker, and as you saw in that winds chart, there's no tropical storm force winds that will be threatening the islands from this potential storm. If it deviates from that track, some models suggesting it might actually go further west. It won't be going further east. Long range, let's check the Atlantic. Oh dear, have we got something coming up? Well, as a matter of fact, yeah, there's a little something there. You can see a system trying to form. A non-tropical low there that starts to move west-southwest in the first week of December, which is interesting, although I doubt anything will come from it. That's in the medium range, day 5 to 10. The GFS was actually more confident in that earlier on, I should say, as well. And this is our merch store. We've done all the serious stuff now. Scan the barcode and take a look at all of our items, as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. And are still waiting for Hone t-shirt. Is it endangered? We'll have to see. We do have some silly range items tonight, in fact just the one. The Western Pacific, this is what we're looking at in the very long range here, and it develops 2 systems there. There's one in South China Sea and one that just tries to wrap up in the Gulf of Thailand for a little period there, and then a 3rd system actually later on in the Philippine Sea. That's a little bit out there. It's a stretch. But certainly we could see maybe one of those systems forming, and odds are for the South China Sea system to be the one. Even gets a typhoon status there and has an erratic track, as you would get usually at the end of the year. Hurricane week is coming up very shortly, and here's our teaser trailer. There it is. We can't wait. Hurricane week coming up this Monday. On this day, on November 26, 1997, we had an unusual cyclone, Osea. Unusual in that it was so far east, it was moving through French Polynesia. Quite rare, only a few storms have travelled through this particular section of the ocean, and more common in strong El Niños, which of course 1997 was. Osea a category 2 at peak, and it was trundling on towards the southeast, and nothing else was active on this day in that year. Let's go back to 2022, 25 years later. The next name on the Atlantic naming list, if we get another one, is Owen. In the Eastern Pacific, Seymour, looking very unlikely, and in the Central Pacific, Hone. Could it be coming? It's like Christmas, isn't it? We've been waiting 3 years, by the way, if people want context. In the Western Pacific, the next name on the list there is Prakar, and in the North Indian Ocean, next up is Mandus. So far we've had 89 storms this year, just 3 away from the annual average. We're surely going to reach that, I would say. In the Australian region, the next name is Darian, Southwest Indian Ocean, Chiniso, and in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Harley. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back tomorrow night.